Hype Man, Raj Nation, the GOAT to market. From Hype HQ in Chicago, Illinois, Startup Hype Man presents the GOAT to Market Show. What's up, everyone? I am your host, Raj Nation, the founder and chief pitch artist of Startup Hype Man. This podcast is where we bring you founders, company leaders, and creatives who are building it, who are doing it, who have been there and done that. And they pull back the curtain on their go-to-market strategies so that you can build a venture that you love and become the GOAT of your industry. Want first listen on episodes before anyone else? Subscribe to our newsletter at startuphypeman.com. You will get alerts every Sunday morning when we release new episodes. All right, let's hear how today's guest is becoming the GOAT. Ladies and gentlemen, making her way to the microphone from West Hartford, Connecticut, and currently residing in Chicago, Illinois. She is the founder and CEO of Peacock Voices. Please welcome Margaret Izard Oskui. Did I get the name right?
The first you did, and that is the first and only time I think anybody will say my name like that. So now I know what it would feel like to be a pro fighter.
There you go. So she is Margaret, as I mentioned, not just founder and CEO of Peacock Voices, but also a professionally trained, and I think classically trained, professional opera singer. We are going to have a really interesting conversation today, and that is on the science of your voice. Quick overview, Margaret, why is this on your mind? Why does the science of your voice matter to you?
Oh gosh, I just feel like it is our primary form of communication, right? How we use our voices and our speaking voices. And it is also really apparent and has become really apparent to me how illiterate most people are when it comes to their speaking voices, and how your voices are actually muscles and ligaments and tendons and tissues that you can use, and you can use your voice and manipulate your body's physicality to have an incredible impact on how people hear you, on how people interact with you, on how your message is received, and also on your confidence, so you know what you're saying is exactly what you mean it to say. And so that's why I think it's really important to understand your body and how it works.
And I also have been working directly with you, Margaret, and Peacock Voices on helping train my voice really to be able to prevent vocal fatigue and better activate the right muscles and use my voice in the right way, so that when I get to the end of doing a performance or an announcing gig or a talk, or even just a long day of Zoom calls, I don't feel like I've thrown out my voice or that it's so hoarse I don't want to speak for the rest of the night. So I've learned a lot already in just the couple months we've been working together. And I'm excited to kind of combine some of those learnings along with some of just like the how to use your voice from like a perception standpoint that our audience is going to gather from this conversation today. Before we really unpack all of that, let's kind of take a walk down memory lane. Now, you are an opera singer, but you actually were originally a violinist growing up. So Talk about the choice of violin when you're young, and then how do you flip from kind of intense training in one instrument to then using your voice as an instrument?
Yeah. So I started playing the violin because of a Patagonia catalog. I know. Tell me you're from Central Connecticut. So my parents, I was 4 years old, and my parents said, you have to learn an instrument. You have to pick what instrument you want to learn. And that season's Patagonia catalog had a little girl on top of a mountain playing the violin. Or like maybe it was a picture inside the catalog, but something with this Patagonia catalog. And I said, I want to do that. And so that's how I started playing the violin. And I happened to be right near the Hartford School of Music, which has, at the time, probably the best Suzuki program, which is a method of teaching young musicians, but string players are their primary focus, at least to my understanding, especially at the time in the country. So it was a very intense program from a very early age. And it was just because it happened to be there. And so I played very seriously until I was about 18 years old. But when I was around 15, I went to a summer camp. Yes, I went to music camp. It was
One
the
time
home
at
of
band
the,
camp.
yeah, this one time at violin camp. But it was where we played 12 hours a day. Yeah. So, we were playing 12 hours a day and I was dying. I was so lucky to be around incredible players who loved it. They were
Mm.
so happy to be playing 12 hours a day. I had friends who were like, my parents will only let me practice 5 hours a day. And I was like, my parents would die if I practiced five
Huh.
hours a day. Meanwhile, my mom's threatening to sell my violin because I won't practice at all. And this woman once a week would come up from the Metropolitan Opera and she would give out 30-minute voice lessons. So my parents said, you know what, just to give you a break, because clearly the 12 hours of playing a day is too much, we'll get you these voice lessons. And I ended up doing the final concert as a singer. And I just realized, like, at a very young age, that sound was super important to me. And then when I discovered singing, I realized vocal sound was like one step closer to what I really cared about.
Mm.
And then I like went to college, wanted to be a totally normal person, was like in an a cappella group and a sorority. And I just like wanted to not be in a super intense conservatory environment. And I kept singing and I just realized like, okay, this is something I really care about. I love the classical world, love classical music. But then as I went into a career singing, I just started realizing my passion was always in teaching and helping
Mm.
other people find their voices and not in performing myself. Like that was never the thing that got me excited. And after time, I just kind of ended up in this world where I realized it's not even about singing. It's just about helping people learn how to fully be themselves and how to communicate exactly the way that they want to communicate. And I just really believe that every single person deserves to know how to use their bodies and know how to show up completely as themselves. And so that's how I ended up in the speech world.
So, do you, given your training, and like opera's not like mainstream in the way a lot of other genres of
What?
music or performance are,
I had no idea.
particularly in the U.S. But do you listen to opera in your spare time, or are you listening to other music?
So I have terrible taste in music.
You're listening to like Fish or like
Yeah.
jam bands and stuff.
Oh, it's worse than that. No, I'm kidding. No, so actually, but my college best friend, she always used to say, for somebody who has dedicated your life to like the highest form of music, you really have the worst taste in like everyday music. But yeah, so I grew up a string player, and to me, when I'm listening to classical music, very frequently it's going to be symphonic works. I
Mm.
love listening to the symphony. I do listen to opera and I go to the opera. If my students, like when I'm teaching singing, if my students are in a concert or an opera, I'll go see them.
Yeah.
But in general, my classical music listening tends to be symphonic or string oriented. And then I listen to pretty much everything. I really like 90s, early 2000s R&B and hip hop. I really like folk music, Americana music. My favorite classical composers are very rooted in folk music.
Mm.
That's always been a huge thing for me.
Okay. So
So,
Americana, folk, big Bob Dylan fan?
um, this is me controversial. I think he's an amazing songwriter, and I wish that Adele has covered like "You Can't Feel My Love" or
Yeah,
whatever the title of that song is. I wish she would just cover everything he ever wrote. I'm not a fan of his singing voice, to be
mm,
honest with you,
sure.
but I love his lyrics and I love his songs. But yeah, John Prine is one of my favorites.
I don't even know who that is, but I'll
Yeah,
take
it's
your word
fine.
for it. I feel like Dylan
But
is like, he kind of falls in that like melodic talking kind of brand of singing.
yeah,
There's
Yeah.
a little bit of raspiness in there, and for some reason, I guess in my opinion and many people's opinion, there is a certain charm to it, and that's. But like, if you were to like stack him up against like whatever someone would say the qualifications of a good singer, I don't actually think he would meet those qualifications.
I feel like to me, actually, Bob Dylan and Taylor Swift live in the same category. They are people that
Mm.
have written songs that are very easy to sing along to, that have lyrics that matter to the people who are listening to their music, and they are accessible. And I think that, music, the beautiful thing about music is that there's something for everybody and there is no right and wrong. So someone can absolutely love listening to Bob Dylan, and I can sit here and say, like, to me, it's like nails on a chalkboard, but I will listen to covers of Bob Dylan all day, every day. Right. And other people can say that they love Taylor Swift, and I can say, I can't wait until somebody covers all of her music. Right. And that's fine. I like her voice more than I like Bob Dylan's. But to me, what makes her so powerful and what makes him so powerful is not their singing. It's the fact that anybody can sing
It's
it.
the relatability. Yeah.
It's the relatability and the accessibility. These aren't
Yeah.
difficult songs to sing. This is not, a big range. It's not
Sure.
super powerful. It's not super technical. You can just sing along on the radio. This is why the
Yeah.
Beatles were really successful, right? You can sing along, but Queen is really hard to sing, right?
Sure.
And you're not singing along to Queen in the car unless you can
Yeah.
like sing along to Queen
You're
in the
humming
car,
along to it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're trying, right? We all tried, but
Sure.
but yeah, and so different artists are really talented and really successful for different reasons, and they're just they sit in different pockets, right? So he's not a great singer, but he's a great storyteller, a great songwriter.
Two
I've gotten
final
in fights
comments
over
I have
this.
to that. That was a very diplomatic way to say you don't like Taylor Swift and not be railed by the internet
No,
for saying
actually,
that.
that's not. I am not a Taylor Swift hater. To me, she's not. I don't like her because of her singing.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? It's like a different category.
The other thing I wanted to say is what you pointed out about both of them, about the accessibility and the relatability factor, is my opinion of pop music has changed a lot over the last like 10, 15 years versus the previous 10, 15. Like growing up and in high school and stuff, I was a hip hop snob. Like I didn't listen to like a lot of mainstream hip hop. I had like my, and then I'd be like, it's almost like I was the arbiter, judge, and jury of what real hip hop is. That was kind of like the mentality and the persona I carried. And I had this like elitism about me because like I knew who Mos Def was while the average suburban high schooler didn't. And then I definitely shifted over time, and I kind of hit this point of like, who am I to tell people what to listen to and what not to listen to? But also, I think in the last few years, or maybe 4 or 5 years, what I've, especially like with the ascendance of a Taylor Swift and how there's so much hatred towards her, I think just for the fact that she is successful and someone's like, oh, anyone could make that song, right? That kind of thing. I actually would argue, again, back in the day, I was very much like, oh, like the underground is where it's at, right? Like,
yeah. Well, you were a teenager.
Yeah. But the reality is, it's actually harder to make music that everyone likes than it is to make music that only a few people like.
I mean, I think so. And I really do stand by this. I may not love Taylor Swift's singing voice. I think she's like a brilliant songwriter. Yeah. I think to make music that she's constantly changing her style, which is not something you see across discography very often, right? And she is making music that has lyrics that matter and are pertinent to her audiences, and they are very large audiences, over and over and over again. I mean, you can't, like, whether or not you agree with it, it is impossible to say that she isn't insanely talented.
Yeah.
I mean, like you can You can say, oh, I don't like listening to her music. I don't think it's, whatever. It's not my cup of tea. But that's like saying, okay, I'm not somebody who likes reading horror, but I'm not going to look at Stephen King and be like, yeah, I don't like
He's a
horror, so
shitty
he's a
author.
bad author. Like, I would never say that. I'm not a horror person. My
Yeah.
imagination is thorough enough on its own. I don't need to add to it. Right.
Yeah.
So, like, for me, like, I'm a huge high fantasy person. I hated the Game of Thrones series. I
Mm-hmm.
hated it. I read them. I hated them.
Mm.
Right. And so, like, but I'm not going to say that they're horrible books. They weren't for me.
Yeah.
And I think that anybody who sits there and hates on specifically a woman, but any artist who has managed to do what she's managed to do, that's a you problem. That's not
Mm-hmm.
a her
I agree.
problem. She
I
is
agree.
very good at what she does.
And
And
she's
she would
sustained
not
it.
be where she is if she wasn't. So I don't know. But, sorry, get off my pedestal.
Okay, so let's really dig in now. You talked about, her voice is not your jam, but let's talk about voice as a topic overall. So,
Yeah.
Peacock Voices as a company. Let's start here. First off, unpack the name for us, Peacock Voices, and then use that and not dovetail, but peacock tail into what the actual services you provide are.
Yeah. So Peacock Voices, there's Peacock. My cousin actually painted that.
That's awesome.
Our logo. Yeah, she made our logo. Very talented. But basically, the idea of the peacock actually came from a singing thing I do with my singing students to relax your larynx. And your larynx is like that lump that you feel move when you're swallowing in your throat. You put your hand on the front of your throat. That's where your vocal folds live. And in order to make sound with your larynx released, which is something you want to do, I tell my students to make a sound very similar to an indignant peacock. And so it became this joke inside the studio about peacocks. But when we think about the human voice, a lot of people, especially folks outside of the voice world, think of it as a singular thing. We consume people's voices after all of the work has happened. So it's like, that's Raj's voice. That's Margaret's voice. That's my husband's voice. That's my sibling's voice, right? But the reality is your voice is a series of decisions that creates the sound that then is what you hear as someone's individual voice. And you have a plethora of options that you can play with to change what that sound is. And so we always say, like, the body of the peacock is your core sound. And then the feathers represent all of the different ways and all the different tools you have to manipulate your voice so that you can have it work for you and tell the story you're wanting to tell specifically. For example, I can talk to you like this, and that's going to change how you interact with me. And I used different feathers in the peacock to make this sound, versus if I speak like this, that's also going to change how you hear me. And I used different feathers. I'm changing things about my voice. But if I speak like this, that also is different choices, right?
For
So all
everyone
of these
listening
are
right now,
adjustments
none
I'm
of this
making.
was AI implementation. This was all on the spot. Margaret adjusting her voice.
Story time with Margaret. No, but yeah, so basically all of that are different. I'm just using my body differently to create different sounds. And that's why we have the plumage, but your core sound and the core mechanism, that's the body of the peacock.
Can you give us a sample of what an indignant peacock would sound like?
I need to stop telling the story. It goes, oh, and it's that kind of sound. And then you go into sounds to be like, oh, oh, and that creates like this big, full operatic sound. But
okay. All right. The indignant peacock. Now I get it.
Yes. But
so you are working with a combination of singers, of performers, but also a lot of executive leaders, a lot of CEOs, a lot of founders on how they can better use their voice. Yeah.
Yeah, so Peacock Voices, the company, only works with speech. So I also teach singing separately from Peacock Voices. So Peacock Voices as a company really aims to work with executives and people looking to head in that direction, who are wanting to become better communicators. So
you kind of gave that idea of like as you shifted your voice into different sounds,
Yeah.
different ranges that you could go, how do you see, almost like, if we think about the science of this, because I know you've done a lot of studying of this, you've got a lot of material behind it. I could probably subjectively say what I thought with each of those transitions you made, but what does the science say behind what one voice sounds like and how that's perceived versus how another? Like, can you kind of run through almost like the scale of perception?
Yeah, so there's research that tells us what vocal characteristics are going to be better for sales, right? So it's vocal characteristics that showcase passion, enthusiasm, excitement, right? So we're going to actually go for a slightly higher pitch frequency. We're going to speak a little bit faster. We're going to use a ton of inflection because that shows you're super excited about something. There's research around, especially for your community, pitching. With 70 to 80%, there was a study done at Yale, with 70, 80% accuracy, they could actually tell who was going to win a pitch competition and by how much, just based on how people use their voices, right? Conversely, if you're trying to show leadership, knowledge, expertise across the board, when we're talking about kind of the American world, the Western European American space, having a lower perceived pitch is going to be seen as stronger leadership. Having stronger silence, we still want a lot of inflection. That's super important for charisma, but we're going to use stronger silence. We're going to have a richer sound. I actually don't lower my pitch frequency. Otherwise, you're going to end up sounding a little bit ridiculous. I think a lot of us can think of women who, a specific woman I'm thinking about in Silicon Valley, who may have made this choice, but but you don't want to actually lower your pitch. That's something I care a lot about. But you can play with resonance. So on the same pitch frequency, this is going to sound higher than this, which is the same pitch frequency, but sounds richer and deeper. This is going to have a stronger leadership knowledge association than this sound. Hi, my name is Margaret. I'm a CEO. Hi, my name is Margaret. I'm a CEO. Right? It's pretty obvious, like, which one.
Yeah.
You're like.
I want to go into some of those shifts you made a little bit further. Before I go into that, as we talk about this concept of like trying to get an audience to receive you in the right way, there is also the side that is, well, how are you getting opportunities for yourself, and how are you building your product, and how are you building your company in a way where people are going to pay attention to you so that you can use your voice in a certain way or not. And that's where I want to introduce all our listeners right now to a company called Code Launch. Look, here's the situation. Everyone else thinks startup life is yacht parties, fast cars, and fine dining. Founders, though, no, we know it's more like late nights, public transit, and ramen noodles. Building a disruptive product is grossly underestimated and requires a rare combination of skill and experience. But you never know with your product what you're going to get with an offshore development team. That moonlighter who said they're good for it is ghosting, and accelerators will teach, but they won't build for you. It really feels like everyone who can help wants money or equity or both, and any wrong decision just puts the launch at risk. Not anymore, because now you can lift off with the help of Code Launch. Code Launch is the only equity-free accelerator, pitch competition, and exposure platform, all wrapped into a venture-tainment spectacle. In Code Launch, selected startups get free software development from top-tier dev teams. Then they pitch and demo their product live on stage to hundreds of stakeholders and compete to secure an investment on the spot. When you make moves with Code Launch, you're closer to turning those not invites today into yacht invites tomorrow. So if you want to join the likes of companies like Endora, Caracorder, Materio, Bioworks, and more, who have all lifted off with the help of Code Launch, here's what you do. You could go to codelaunch.com and apply. But if you want to have your application fast-tracked for review, if you want to literally cut the line, then you want to go to the unique link that's in the show notes, because that's for Startup Hype Man friends and fans of Startup Hype Man and of the Goat to Market show. Use that link, fill out your application, and it's going to get fast-tracked. It's going to get bumped to the top of the line for review. We code, you launch. It's Code Launch. And today on the Goat to Market show, we're with Margaret Izard Oskui, who who is talking to us about the science of voice. Now, before the break there, Margaret, you were kind of running through the different transitions you could make with your own voice. I'm actually curious, like, from the female perspective, like, you know, if you can you do that example of almost like the high and whiny like voice?
Yeah, so this is just utilizing forward resonance. And this is that like perceived as high and whiny. But if I take this exact same pitch frequency and I utilize a richer resonance and a more balanced resonance, this is the exact same pitch frequency.
It's so
I'm not
interesting.
changing the pitch.
As you changed there, I could like, it's almost like what I was even picturing was being talked about changed. It's like it became almost like, I'm like, oh wow, this is like a nature documentary I'm listening to now. and maybe because there's a peacock on the wall behind you, but maybe not.
And in the left is the peacock in the wild. Yes.
So then you also had like, you know, you could go deeper as well, but like,
yeah,
this starts to get into like perception and gender bias and stuff. But like for women in particular, and maybe for men too, but like, is there a point at which like you're trying to hit a certain range or pitch frequency to be like perceived well, but then now it's actually almost working counter to what people would expect of that gender role? Like Miley Cyrus is a good example, right? Like if you hear her talk, her voice is like really deep and raspy, and you could close your eyes, and if you didn't know it was her, you might not necessarily know that's a woman speaking based on what we know about, or what traditional, like essentially gender roles and voice association has taught us.
Yeah. So I have a lot of feelings about this. So buckle up. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, let's go.
But so a traditionally masculine perceived speech pattern in the United States is lower in pitch frequency, rhythmically oriented. So you're going to get a lot of this. Hi, my name is Margaret Izard Oskui. It sounds utterly ridiculous in my body, but you've heard a lot of men talk that way without realizing it. Whereas a traditionally feminine perceived speech pattern, and it's relatively monotone. A feminine perceived speech pattern is going to have more forward resonance. It's going to be much less rhythmically oriented, a lot more melodic, and have a lot more inflection. Hi, my name is Margaret Izard Oskui. That's like a traditionally very feminine perceived speech pattern. Now, we live in a place where certain characteristics of a masculine perceived speech pattern are seen as the characteristics for strong leadership. We hear it like all the time in politics. She sounds annoying. Mm-hmm. She can be using the exact same vocal characteristics as her male counterpart. And by the way, for this, I'm talking about cisgender voices and bodies, just because it very much changes. But she can be using the same characteristics and it doesn't read the same way because our bodies are different. My vocal folds are much smaller than your vocal folds, right? My vocal folds are the diameter of a dime. Your vocal folds are roughly the diameter of a quarter. So we're talking about very different sizes. So when I adopt a traditionally masculine perceived speech pattern, it sounds pretty ridiculous in my body, right? Mm-hmm. So instead, I have to find something that sounds like leadership in my body, that can read as powerful in my body, because my body is different from your body. Just like if I want to sound soothing and I want to calm people down, it's going to sound different in my body than it does in your body. Right. And so the whole
like
point
a
of this
voice right there.
Yeah. Turn left here. But yeah. But the reality is that everybody's body is different. And this is what I mean by when I say that, like, understanding your body and how your body works is so critical. And what's crazy is we do this all the time. We teach kids how to use their bodies in gym class all the way through school. We teach kids how to use their bodies, their brains in school, all the way through school. You're required. Nobody ever teaches us how to use our voices and how to understand our voices to properly communicate. Don't use your outside voice, like talk about unhelpful feedback. Right. I have so many clients who come to me, they're like, well, I was told I sound annoying. That is such bad feedback. Like, how
Mm.
is that helpful? Right. But it's because we don't have the vocabulary for it. You don't sound annoying. It's not annoying. It is because of X, Y, and Z very specific characteristic that we make a tiny adjustment to. And then you actually sound super charismatic.
Right.
Right. I sound too energetic. What? Like, okay, let's organize that energy. And all of a sudden, that energy becomes a superpower instead of a hindrance, right? And so I just think that there's a lot of misunderstanding. And I think a lot of people think, one, that there are right and wrongs with voice, which is not true. There is no right, there is no wrong. It is all a choice, it is all up to you. And then, two, there's a lot of misconceptions about what you're actually studying and what you're actually thinking about. So, all these studies about pitch frequency, about how it's like low voices are what people pay attention to. Tell me, does hi, my name is Margaret Izard Oskui and hi, my name is Margaret Izard Oskui. Which one
Well,
of those sounds more like a leader you want to follow?
I feel like the first one you were kind of like, I almost got like stood up and was like, yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
And what if I say, hi, my name is Margaret Izard Oskui?
That one, I mean, I'm like, okay with that. It wasn't grating and I didn't not believe you.
Yeah. Like as like a CEO, would you want to talk with somebody who says, hi, how are you? Or hi, how are you?
Yeah. I thought that I feel like you're shouting at me, and that second one just
Yeah,
did. The
exactly.
other one, I was
So
like, oh,
like
this person seems friendly.
so the second one just has a rich resonance, but it's got a higher pitch frequency. That first one that I did, this is a
Hmm.
forward resonance, but it's lower in pitch. So
Hmm.
like all those studies that study pitch frequency, and they say, oh, okay, well, you know, they liked this person, they think of this lower pitch as being a stronger leader. It's like, were you actually studying the pitch or were you studying the resonance? Because women are trained to speak with more forward resonance, men are trained to speak with a richer resonance. This is how we've been socialized, right?
Huh.
So like how much of it is actually pitch frequency, how much of it is resonance? And so, how can we find that authenticity inside our bodies, and really understand the language and the science of what's happening instead of just saying, like, oh, well, I've got a high pitched voice, so I'm SOL. Like, that's, and I
Sure.
do, and I get men who have higher voices and they're like, well, I just sound high. And I'm like, that is, we can play with that. Like, we
Hmm.
can make you be perceived as richer. Right. So,
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack behind this. Let's come back
yeah.
to almost like I want to like maybe go through a series of like reframes here for what like common
Hmm.
feedback a person might get is. So if someone gets a
Yeah.
feedback that they're too energetic, they get feedback that they sound whiny. What is like if you take like those most common things someone might say in response, what's the helpful reframe for that speaker to be able to actually start making improvements or better understand themselves?
Yeah. So actually, the first thing I'm going to do is send you to my LinkedIn or Instagram page because every Friday I read aloud showcasing different vocal characteristics
Hmm.
where like I read aloud from a book of the month and I actually showcase like this is what it sounds like if you could be perceived as aggressive, and then this is what it'd be like if you didn't want to sound aggressive. And they're all
Yeah.
different options, right? Not aggressive isn't a singular thing. Not aggressive is a million options. So I showcase all sorts of different options. Just so like I will give a couple now, but there's a whole slew of stuff, of resources on my social media that showcases this exact thing. But basically, if I had a client come to me saying she was told she was too enthusiastic, which is just like the most one of the most obnoxious pieces of feedback I've actually ever heard a client come to me with. So I was like, you want your employee to be less enthusiastic? Like that's crazy. But all we did was harness that energy to make it work to have a richer and more consistent sound. So instead of the energy kind of being all over the place, it became much more consistent. So we just took that energy and refocused it. I will get clients who say, I get told I'm not collaborative, or I don't come off as, I come off as a little aggressive. And for them, we work on inflection. We work on a more continuous line of sound instead of a super rhythmic and monotone speech pattern,
Yeah.
right? I love that idea. And I love that idea
Hmm.
mean two very different things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So the idea here of you've used the phrase forward resonance versus, and what's the opposite of that?
I say richer resonance. So I talk about resonance like it's on this linear plane. That's what I call singer science. It's not real
Yeah.
science. um, the real
Fair.
science is a lot less tangible. So this is how we work
Sure.
on it, just so it's like easy to understand. But just to be really clear, that's not the real science of what's happening.
Yeah.
But this idea that it's just on this linear, just x-axis plane, which it like is, and everything with voice is yes and, but yeah. So forward resonance is this kind of very forward. In my body, it sounds kind of like a valley girl. Hey, how are
Mm-hmm.
you? Right. And then it can go all the way back to this kind of very silly Gus Gus face. Right. And that's all the way back there. Right. And then
geez.
Everything in between. Oh,
So,
Cinderella.
so then if someone's listening to this right now and they pause this episode and they speak out loud in their car or at the coffee shop, wherever they are, let's say they say the sentence out loud, hi, my name is so-and-so. How can they identify in that moment which kind of resonance or where on the scale they have? Because it's one thing to like hear you do it. Is there a way, like in hearing yourself, to know or identify where you are on that spectrum?
Yeah. So I feel like it's really important to get to know your body. So learning your voice and learning how to use your voice and control your voice is much, much, much closer to being an athlete than it is to something intellectual. So you have to understand where you're actually feeling vibrations. So if you're speaking and you feel the most sensation in the front of your mouth, that's going to be a more forward resonance. If you're speaking and you feel the most vibrations like further back in your body, that's going to be that further back resonance. But also, if you don't have like a barometer for what that is, it's very difficult, right?
Yeah.
And so playing with all the different character voices that you can play with just helps you kind of find, okay, these are my extremes. This is all the stuff in between. Now, when I speak, where on that sliding scale do I normally sit? And then how do I want to play with that? Right?
I want to take this and talk about how it affects now, like the pitch itself, if someone's in like a live pitch scenario. Before we go into that, let me just talk to our listeners for a second, because as we start to talk about pitch, there's the voice side of it and there's the content side of it. And the content side of it is all about vision, right? Every great founder has one. And the thing is, there's a huge difference between the vision you might have in your head and want to say versus what actually gets said. And then there's also a difference between the big picture vision and the ground level understanding. And the last thing you want is for someone to say, what is this again? I don't get it. The vision can get cloudy real quick if you feel like you're too in the weeds, too technical, or simply too caught up in the day-to-day. Now, what do you do about it? There's DIYing it, and then you end up with 18 versions of a pitch deck that you still don't really like. There's going to ChatGPT and trying to get a pitch there. What you're getting is very, very broad, generic language that really isn't even specific to your company. Advisors can't dig in the way that we really need them to. And then there's a ton of agencies that end up creating more fluff than actual substance of what you're going to use. At the end of the day, the goal is to become a unicorn, which means you can't come off sheepish or like a sly fox. Now, I'm here to tell you why not, instead of just go to market, instead, don't become a unicorn, but become the GOAT, specifically the GOAT to market. And that's where we come in at Startup Hype, man. We help figure out the actual words to say and the story to tell across multiple scenarios, whether that's your upfront elevator pitch, your pitch deck, or more, so that your investors and your customers are going to lean into your vision, connect it to the ground level day-to-day understanding, and ultimately, as a result, recognize you not just as the best, but as the only option in your market. We've worked with a ton of companies over 9 years, helping raise over $100 million, see tons of revenue growth as well. And more recently, we've even but through our work, we've had founders outright break into tears in front of us because they can't believe their story has finally been unlocked and they feel finally understood in such a way they weren't able to do before. If you want to have that happen for you, let's make it happen. Why be a unicorn when you can be the GOAT. Check us out and learn more at startuphypeman.com/fundraising. That's startuphypeman.com/fundraising. One more time. Why be a unicorn when you can be the GOAT? Today on the Goat to Market show, we're with Margaret Izard Oskui talking about the science of voice. And so we think about that idea of pitching. Let's bring it to the voice behind pitching. A couple of questions I want to ask you here. First is, should someone consider using their voice differently if they are, say, pitching on stage versus like if they're in a meeting and they're, giving their pitch, or whether it's a sales meeting or like a fundraising pitch meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I think that from an acoustic perspective, yes, right? Depending on the room you're in and the tools that you have, how you use your voice is going to change, right? If you're in a large room with no microphone, that's going to change how you need to speak so that you can be heard. If you're in a small room with a microphone, if you're in a small room without a microphone, if you're in a large room with a microphone. I've had clients in the middle of pitch competitions and their microphone cuts out. Mm-hmm. Right. And then all of a sudden they have to make an adjustment in real time so that they can still be heard and still win. Right. So it really depends on your surroundings, and it also depends on the nature. Right. A pitch competition is very different than when you have an hour-long meeting with a potential investor and it's about getting to know each other. So and also at what point in that meeting, what are you doing? So when you are pitching, that is different than when you are answering questions or having a conversation, right?
Could you give an example of what the pitch voice might sound like versus what the question voice? And I know that could change from person to person, but I guess if you were to say like, hey, this archetype, here's what this could look like in this situation versus here.
So I actually really believe in making adjustments depending on what you are trying to do. So even inside a pitch, you're going to use your voice differently. There are slides inside a pitch deck where you want to be showing that you are hungry. I have a friend who works for a VC firm, and he was saying, you can't teach hunger. And that's what we look for in our entrepreneurs. And I was like, but you can teach people to sound hungry. and And he was like, what? And I was like, you can. That's what actors do, right? Actors aren't necessarily feeling everything they're feeling, but you can sound like you do, right? But there are certain slides where you're going to be showing like, I'm passionate, I'm excited. You're going to use more inflection, a little bit higher resonance, maybe a little bit more forward, a little bit higher pitch, maybe a little bit more forward resonance. You might even speed up a little bit. And you're passionate, you're all in. This is it. I love this. You want to be on my team. We're going to be the greatest of all time, right? And then there are moments when you want to show that I am an expert. I know exactly what I'm talking about. We are the best at what we do, and I am going to gain your trust because I know. And that is going to have a richer resonance. That's going to be a little bit slower. You're going to use stronger silence, right? And part of giving a good pitch is understanding the purpose of every slide. And there has to be intent behind every slide. What are you trying to make them feel? Because the decision is not, it's really based off of if they like you, right? Like they have to want to work with you. You can have the greatest idea, but if they're like, oh God, this person is sitting here and talking like this the whole time, it's like, that is not it. I am not about to give you, $500,000. So it's understanding the point of the slide. It's understanding the point of the question. It's understanding even inside a question response. Is this a moment for me to be showcasing that passion? Is this a moment for me to be showcasing my knowledge and expertise? Is this a moment for me to be really commanding attention? Is this a moment for me to be making everybody calm and happy? Is this right? Like, what are you trying to achieve in those moments? And then that's how you adjust your voice.
I was giving a workshop recently for the finalists for the Code Launch Toronto event. And, most of what I was talking about was pitch content, but I did spend a little bit of time talking because they asked about stage presence stuff. And I similarly, I was like, look, if you want to get people really excited, you want to probably speed up how you're talking about, you want to build energy, but then if you really want them to look up from their phone and stop what they're doing and pay attention, maybe you get a little bit softer, you talk a little bit slower, and maybe you even step forward on the stage because you're trying to really nail that point. And then you want to bring them off of that, and you maybe take a step back, and it's this big, beautiful, broad problem that we're solving because everyone needs to know that this thing exists, right? You kind of create that flow and that sequence. And that's I'm just adding on to your point here. That's really what helps us, or really helps someone be perceived, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the key is, I think the mistake I see most often, and I see this with people who are in startups who are pitching, I see this with folks giving presentations, is they view their presentations as times to get information out. And the reality is, the point of talking, the point of pitching, the point of giving a presentation is not to get your information out. It is to get your listener to understand, internalize, and buy into what you are saying. And that is a very, very different problem to solve than getting your information out. So the way that you say every single word that you say is for the listener to understand, internalize, and buy into what it is that you are saying. And when you change your mindset around that, how you use your voice becomes critical, because all of a sudden it's not, and then 42% is this, and then 57%. Like, I don't get why they don't care about this. Well, they don't care about it because you didn't say it in a way that makes them care about it. Like, you care about it, but you're not selling to yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you need to make them care about it, and you have to say it in a way that makes them care.
This is music to my ears, and you're not even singing. Okay, real quick, last question before we hit our wrap up. So let's say someone's got a pitch competition tomorrow, or they've got a big sales meeting tomorrow, or something like that. What are some almost quick vocal prep routines, or that they could do, or maybe even what's your own routine that you would do before you have a big performance of any kind?
Ooh, my own routine. Well, first and foremost, your voice, like I said, it's an athletic endeavor. So warm up your body. I got this advice from a voice teacher a long time ago, and she always said, I always go for a long walk the morning of an opera. And it's so true. If your body isn't warm, then your voice isn't going to be warm, right? So you just want to warm up your body, move your body, whether you do yoga, whether you like going for walks, whether, for me, I love Muay Thai, or you're a Pilates person, whatever it is, just move your body, get your body going, because that's going to get the blood flowing, and that'll make your vocal folds more happy. And then I just assess what's going on in my body. So if my vocal folds are grumpy that day, I'll do SOVT exercises. We have a YouTube video about that. We have a blog post about it, but SOVT exercises, or straw work, are basically like PT and weightlifting for your vocal folds. They're really healthy. They're really good for you. And then I would say that the biggest piece of advice I give to every single person I work with is my rule of 3. Set 3 intentions before every single presentation, pitch, performance that you do. 2 should be technical and 1 should be cultural. So whether you're somebody who has a hard time with having enough energy, okay, so then one of those things are going to be have enough energy. Maybe you normally speak too fast, so then it's slow down. Maybe you speak too slowly, so then maybe it's speed up. Maybe you have a lot of nervous energy, so it's saying use that energy to ground down instead of letting it fly all over the place. And then the cultural one would be have fun, communicate, enjoy yourself. Nobody liked watching people be miserable, so mine is always have fun. But but right, so figure out what your cultural thing is. We can't remember everything, but if you can set the intention of 3 things just to kind of ground yourself and have something to hold on to, it can really help guide you as you go through your pitch or your presentation. So.
And actually, before this episode, I did my own SOVT exercises that you taught me, and I've got my straw right here.
Music to my ears.
All right. I guess I could return the favor there. All right, let's hit our wrap up.
Yeah.
Now. Where can our listeners find you, Margaret? Where can they learn more about Peacock Voices?
Absolutely. So we have our website, peacockvoices.com. We also have a ton of information on LinkedIn and Instagram, Peacock Voices. My personal LinkedIn and Instagram also has a lot of resources. So that's Margaret Izard Oskui. And then, yeah, that's where you can find us.
Who is one person that you know who has been helpful on your journey you want to give a shout out to?
Oh gosh, one person who's been helpful on our journey. That's a really hard one because we've had a very, very, very generous community. Our friends have been so generous with us. But I would say that I want to give a shout out to my friend Rohit, because when we first started, he actually sat us down and said, okay, this is how you build a business. And he literally went through like weeks of putting us through like a course
Nice.
of helping us learn how to do the business side of things. And I think that that just really helped two musicians who were like, oh, we want to do this thing that we love. And be like, and here is the stuff that matters. And I'd also like to shout out to 1871 because they have a really good program for startups. And I don't know how we got in because we're not in tech in any way, shape, or form. But their Pyros program was critical for us. So
great. That's funny you said the person you said, only because that's also happens to be my brother's name.
Oh, no way.
Definitely not the same person though, because he would not know the first thing.
He's got a sister, but
okay. Now let's give our top one or two lessons or takeaways for the listeners based on the discussion today. I'll go first and I'll toss it to you. Topic today was the science of your voice. I want to come back to one of the things you said towards the end of our conversation that I really liked, which is the goal of your pitch is not to provide information. It is to be understood. It is to get people to understand what you're saying. Margaret,
yeah.
Margo.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. And also I would say learn your body. Just like you learned how to kick a ball and walk and run, and learn how to use your body, get to know your voice, because that's where you'll get consistency. That's where you'll get control. And eventually that's how you get your power as a communicator.
My final question, which is how we end every episode of this show, fill in the blank, Margaret. Entrepreneurship is blank.
High risk, high reward.
High risk, high reward. I love it. Hey, listeners, when you were listening to this, did you have a follow-up question you wanted to ask Margaret, but you couldn't because you're there and we're here? Well, never fear, because we are bringing Margaret into the Goat to Market Club. That's our online community. She's going to be doing an Ask Me Anything in a Reddit-style format the whole first week that this episode is live. So you want to ask her more about SOVT exercises. You want to ask her about your own voice. Do you want to ask her about prep routines or what forward resonance is? Anything under the sun. It's an Ask Me Anything. So you can really ask Margaret anything. The M in this case stands for me and Margaret. Ask Margaret anything. The whole first week, this episode is live. She'll be popping into our communities to do that. To join, if you're not a member of the community already, just head to startuphypeman.com/GTM-club, startuphypeman.com/GTM-club. Margaret, thank you so much for joining us today on the Goat to Market Show, and we'll see you inside the AMA.
Thank you. It was lovely talking to you.
That'll put a bow on this one. Before we head out of here, a couple quick housekeeping items. Number one, did you like what you heard? Well, give us a subscribe and a follow. Maybe share it with one friend who you think would find this valuable. Number two, remember that Ask Me Anything I told you about at the end of the episode? That goes down exclusively inside of Goat to Market Club, our online founder and startup community. And you can access it for free. Membership is 100% free at startuphypeman.com/GTM-club. Number three, need pitch help? Startup Hype Man is your man. Whether it's a fundraising narrative or a go-to-market or category narrative, we've got you covered to make sure you have messaging that doesn't help you just go to market, but of course what? Helps you become the GOAT to market. All right, we will see you next week here on the Goat to Market Show. Thank you for listening. And remember, why be a unicorn when you can be the GOAT?